We are a statewide organization that is working towards getting single-payer, universal, publicly funded health care in the state of Ohio. Health care for all Ohioans. Yay!
Once you can't pay the fine, you are absolutely going to prison. Once you get that charge for possession, you cannot use financial aid to go to college, to get a skilled trade. If something happens and you need public housing, you cannot live in public housing because now you have a possessions charge. I knew that had to change.
I lost 3 of my friends to heroin overdoses in the past 2 years, and those are my deep, deep friendships. I've lost far more people that were associates and acquaintances of mine to heroin overdoses, and I have seen the devastation that heroin and also the war on drugs, the super failed war on drugs, has had in Cincinnati, in my neighborhood, in our community, and across our state. So I work for the Amos Project, and we organized to collect over 730,000 signatures across the state of Ohio to put issue 1 on the ballot in November.
I don't want to vote for a lesser of two evils. I've done it before. I've seen this story before. I've seen this pattern happening before. Promises are made, and then as soon as I vote for the lesser two evils, as soon as they get into power, guess what? I can't distinguish the one I voted for the one that I thought I was voting against.
We're not a one-issue party. We really have a well-researched platform that we've put together that cover a holistic set of issues. So we're looking at our problems in Ohio kind of holistically, how we can solve those issues, and with a broad vision of what it can look like when we have a green Ohio.
We're out of time, We're out of time. This is the Hail Mary moment. We got to do it. No one else is. We got to stand up for ourselves because we have a world that's ready to be, not only to survive, but to thrive. We can create that world for an America and a world that works for all of us, that puts people, planet, and peace over profit. We have the power to do it. With Connie and Brett, we can start it right here, right now in Ohio. Let's make it so.
Without further ado, I give you a woman who I've been very proud to run with and to share this journey, a woman who is a civil rights attorney and who is a revolutionary and a disruptor of the two-party status quo, Constance Gadell-Newton.
Thank you. Thank you, Brett. Everybody, Brett Joseph, running for Lieutenant Governor. Thank you. All right. Yes, my name is Constance Gadell-Newton. I'm running for governor as the Green Party candidate. And it's great to be back in Cincinnati again. I've had a great time on prior occasions coming for the Black Family Reunion, the Gay Pride marches. And I've been to Lydia's before. So thanks, Lydia's, for hosting us here today. As you probably know, if you know the Green Party, if you know anything about the Green Party, you know, of course, that we're about the environmental values. So we feel very strongly about fracking, and that's a major issue for us. So we want an immediate moratorium on fracking and injection wells in Ohio to protect our clean water for all Ohioans, clean drinking water, and so a big part of that is also the community rights movement, right? Do you guys have a community rights movement down here in Hamilton County? Okay, not yet. Well, you guys may want to start. So yesterday we had Tish O'Dell talking with us from CellDef, and she was giving us a primer and explanation about community rights. In Columbus, there's been a Columbus Community Bill of Rights, and around Toledo area, there's also been a Lake Erie Bill of Rights. And the idea there is to give the people in a local area the ability to make laws and regulations that affect them so that they can protect themselves in their local area. So after 5 years of effort in Columbus and probably years of effort in the Lake Erie area, they finally got the signatures they needed, yet our local governments were throwing up additional requirements that they had to meet through the boards of elections, and they, again, have been kept off the ballot. So that's something that we have been, part of trying to really advocate that, lend credibility to that, and support that movement, because part of the problem that we're seeing is that large out-of-state corporations are coming in and polluting in Ohio. And the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, I guess, is okay with this. They accept funding per barrel of frack waste that we take from out of state and put in our injection wells in our water supply here in Ohio. And, yeah, you said it. But also, there's a proposal to use frack waste, they call it brine, innocuous. They make it sound very innocuous, but it's a proprietary chemical compound that they're proposing to use as a de-icer on our highways. So that also, is obviously something we oppose that can still go into the water supply. So, but the Green Party, while we care a lot about our environmental issues and we have a strong green energy policy, we'll be promoting a transition to green energy in Ohio, and I'll tell you about that. We're not a one-issue party. We really have a well-researched platform that we've put together that cover a holistic set of issues. So we're looking at our problems in Ohio kind of holistically, how we can solve those issues, and with a broad vision of what it can look like when we have a green Ohio. So from our energy policy to our environmental policy, our food policy, and social justice policies, we have a holistic approach to what can be a greener, more beautiful, socially just Ohio. So social justice is, thank you. Social justice is one of our key values along with grassroots democracy. And you may wonder why, people may ask you, why do you support the Green Party? Why green? Well, one thing is we perform a really essential function in our democracy by being a political party and giving people an additional choice. So, of course, it is wonderful to be part of a community group, a citizens action group, an environmental group, or an activist group that advocates for a certain cause. And we absolutely want people to continue working on these issues in your groups. But the Green Party is more than an activist group, or it's different than an activist group. It's actually an electoral body in electoral politics where we can run candidates. So right now we see a political environment that is extremely polarized and really doesn't represent the people. We don't have a political system that really represents the political will of the people. And as far as our way of voting, I think that that's something that could be changed for the better. We can have a multi-party system where different viewpoints are represented. And also, I would just say that mathematically, we're smart enough to figure out a system that actually represents the political will of the people, so that when you go to vote, you're not making the choice between the lesser of two evils. You can actually vote for what you want to with a clear conscience, and if we have a better system, you'll be able to do that, and that will actually reflect the political will of the majority of the voters. So the idea is with ranked choice voting, with approval voting, alternate systems like that, we have the ability to actually have a political system that can reflect what we want. And that's something that if we did a ballot initiative for ranked choice voting in Ohio, that could be a multi-partisan effort. So I envision that as something that progressive Democrats might want to join us in, libertarians might want to join us in that effort, Republicans might want to join us in that effort. And that's something that maybe we could have consensus on, that we need a better system of voting, you know, to try to move towards that change. So I do think that the Green Party, as we exist now, we give you a choice to vote for what's really important to you. I hope, you know, that you share those key green values for us, with us. The 10 key values are what really define the Green Party. So, oh, they're right here. So we have grassroots democracy. That means that the democracy is in the hands of the people and that it is not a top-down structure. So it's not the politicians telling us what to do. Grassroots democracy, we actually have an active participation in electing people and creating the laws. Social justice, you know, there are a lot of social justice issues right now that the Green Party is part of. The Green Party is the only party to have in its national platform reparations for slavery and Native American genocide. And that's something that the Black Caucus of the Green Party and many others in the Green Party are very interested in moving that forward. That's something that connects with the prison abolition movement in Ohio, that we support that as well. And, you know, ending privatized prisons and moving towards a restorative justice model for our justice system is just a small part of that. That's one step towards what we need to be doing. So ecological wisdom, of course, the environment, nonviolence, that really informs a lot of you know, how we deal with certain problem solving. We want a nonviolent solution. Decentralization, that means that you all voters, are an important part of how the Green Party works. That decentralization, that means that you have the power. And community-based economics, feminism and gender equity, diversity, personal and global responsibility. Now, I think that kind of intersects with the environmentalism. We're looking, and the peace movement, right? We're looking at some of our world's problems and saying, okay, well, maybe we want to actively be pacifists and environmentalists to take responsibility for our actions in that way. And future focus and sustainability. So we really do get a lot of our values out of the environmental movement and from ecofeminism. Eco-socialism is a big part of the Green Party, so we have you know, worked our economics into that type of model as well. Okay, so the 10 key values, that's what makes us green. Thanks. Yeah. So we've had a good time going around the state meeting people from a lot of different backgrounds, and sometimes people meet us and they haven't even heard of the Green Party, and they say, okay, well, so this is a party that doesn't accept corporate donations, really represents the people, is for the environment and for workers. You know, where do I sign up? People are really interested and excited about that when they hear about it for the first time. Another thing we've heard is, we just feel forgotten by politics. We feel forgotten by politicians. Nobody comes out here. You guys are the first ones to come out here. I have seen up close and personal a lot of the issues that my clients have with drug addiction and how they're desperate to get into treatment. A lot of people simply don't have health insurance. They don't have the health care that they need. There are wait lists at clinics, and they're trying desperately to get help. So when Mike DeWine, Mr. Tough on Crime, says that issue 1 is going to just make Ohio a drug magnet, you know, for the United States. I really think that that's disingenuous. It's like, this is a healthcare issue. We should not be incarcerating people for what is essentially a health issue, a medical issue. So people do need medical intervention and treatment. We need better access to doctors and nurses to help with the opiate epidemic. This was in part caused by pharmaceutical companies and doctors overprescribing because they'd been courted by the pharmaceutical companies to push products onto the public. When I ask a lot of my clients, you know, when did you start using drugs? When did you start using? They would say, well, I had a knee surgery. Like, that's how it started. They had a knee surgery and they were prescribed pain pills, and then they were not properly weaned off by their doctor or by their medical team. They're just sent out there with a prescription. Sometimes they're overprescribed, and by the time the prescription is up, they're addicted. So they get cut off. The pain clinics or pill mills were shut down, but that caused a lot of people to go to the street to get their medication. Then heroin, unfortunately, is cheaper and easier to get sometimes than that medication. So you see a cycle of somebody having a prescription and then going to when their prescription runs out, they try to get it another way, and then they move to heroin. So it's very sad to see that our healthcare non-system that doesn't work for anybody is causing this drug epidemic. So we really need to treat drug addiction as a health condition. We support issue 1. Right, issue 1. So we really we want a transition to green energy. I think that can provide a lot of jobs, green energy jobs for our state. We're interested in promoting worker-owned co-ops so that our energy manufacturing is local, Ohio-based, locally owned, and that the profits are staying in Ohio with Ohio workers. Also union jobs, of course. So worker-owned and union jobs for some of those green manufacturing, and municipally owned and controlled, community-controlled utility companies, so that we have the ability to, to take control locally of our utilities. That, I think, is going to be a great generator of income for Ohio. We can be a leader in green energy and even sell wind turbines and solar panels to other states. Maybe even get to the point where we're supplying energy for other states from green energy. As far as like big corporations, a lot of times they're getting tax abatements and taking away that tax money from our state, from our educational system, from our local programs and local governments. So we need to keep that money in the state. Provide adequate local government funding so that we can bring our school system into a constitutional funding model. So the DeRolf decision was, found our school funding model based on property taxes unconstitutional. We need to, in my view, we need to provide adequate local government funding so that property taxes are not the main funder. We need to stop redlining and change our banking policies and practices. So redlining is, something that has really contributed to a lot of racial segregation in the housing market. We want an open housing market and lending market to all Ohioans. Local banks and state banks are going to be a big part of what we're doing too. And also, we are very, very much proponents of decriminalizing and legalizing marijuana for recreational and medicinal use. So recreational marijuana could be a big boon to our state as well. And industrial hemp is a crop that can help farmers and industry in Ohio. We can make a lot of eco-friendly products out of hemp. forks, disposable forks and things out of hemp instead of plastic. You can compost them. So there's a lot that can be done with hemp, and that can be a great income generator for Ohio, help Ohio farmers. And the licensing fees and taxes from recreational marijuana is something that can help fund our schools and our healthcare system. So in order to allow those businesses to thrive, I think we will need state banks, because the federal banks on the federal level, they are not going to do business with marijuana organizations. So that's something that we can promote as a way to assist that industry being able to have growth in Ohio. And also the decriminalization, I think that it's not something that we want a few business owners to have control of. So that was one reason why the constitutional amendment was struck down. The people just simply did not want 3 big guys at the top owning all the weed. Right. So, you know, it's a plant. It's something that should not be criminalized. If people want to grow a small amount or give a gift to someone, that should not be criminalized. But if you're going to sell it at a business, you could get a license similar to a beer license that you would get from the Department of Commerce. And that licensing scheme should not be burdensome, overly burdensome. It should be something that's actually accessible to small business owners if they want to start a cannabis business in their community. And along with the local community rights, if there's a community that doesn't want to have it in their community, then they can vote not to have it in their community. Simple as that. So I think that's something that is just kind of common sense. And it's an example of an area where we're really starting to reach consensus that the current system of laws is unjust, and that we would do better with a change. That's something that people can see across the political spectrum. Of course, you'll get people who are absolutely opposed to that for their own reasons. But I do think that the tide is shifting with that issue. The Green Party has been kind of a pioneer on certain issues, like legalized marijuana. We never thought we'd see the day, right, until the first state decriminalized marijuana. But also, gay marriage was something that the Green Party was a leader in before any of the other parties were trying to promote the acceptableness of same-sex marriage. The Green Party always, you know, supported that as a human rights issue. So you can look to the Green Party for cutting edge solutions and answers to some of our political problems. And, you know, we're really thinking outside the box. We're thinking independently. Brett and I have done a lot of research on our platform, trying to get a solid economic platform, because inevitably people always say, like, okay, so you want to provide free education, free tuition, free daycare, free healthcare, free food for kids. Those kids, they eat so much. How are we ever going to afford that? How are you going to pay for it? That's always the question. And so that's an important political question. It is important. The feasibility and the practicability of our goals it's very important. And so we have done a lot of research into the economics. So when you look at a single payer healthcare system, it turns out that the savings in administrative costs makes up for the current system that we have now. Basically, right now, this system we have, we're wasting our money on administrative costs and things, you know, the billing back and forth between the insurance company, the markups. So insurance companies and pharmaceutical suppliers are marking the price of prescriptions up. And this actually happened to me recently. I'm type 1 diabetic, and so I have to get insulin pump supplies. And my insurance company would not allow me to just use any old pharmacy. They wanted to specify which online pharmacy or company I could get my supplies through. So I went to them, and unfortunately I had somehow stumbled into a high deductible plan. Bad Connie. So I ordered the small amount of supplies that I could get, and then when I researched it online, what they had charged me, they had marked the price up about 300%. They tripled the price and were asking me to pay this out of pocket because it was under my deductible. So, you know, I'll be honest, I haggled with them and said, you know, this is just ridiculous. But we see this system-wide. If they're doing it to me, they're doing it to a lot of people. And I've even heard about it on the news that the pharmaceutical suppliers and the insurance companies are basically colluding to mark up the prices so that we pay more and they make a bigger profit. And, you know, this system is just unjust. It's a lot of paperwork and we can save a lot of money on it. But circling back, you know, how are you going to pay for it is always the question. So this is a big example of a change for the better that pays for itself, right? So this is something that, with the cost savings, it's going to pay for itself. So a lot of it, I think, is about priorities and keeping an open mind. When it comes to education, that's something that is a matter of priorities. Instead of giving a stadium a huge tax abatement for 20 years, so they don't have to pay taxes in my community and they can have their big team, their fancy sports team, you know, they get a tax abatement for 20 years, and then by the time the 20 years is up, the stadium is crumbling down and the team wants to leave. They want to go find somewhere else to go play sports, and they're leaving, and then we don't have that tax base after the 20 years. They're gone. So 20 years we went without taxes to support our schools. And so that's one example of, you know, let's stop the bleeding here with the tax abatements, the privatization, the profit motives. That is all coming out of our pockets. And, you know, it's not just coming out of our pockets, it's coming out of our lives and our livelihoods and our families and our ability to survive and thrive as Ohioans. So there, I think when we ask, you know, how are you going to pay for it, it's a matter of priorities and ethics. So, okay, so, you know, nonviolence is a big priority for us. So by cutting down on some of the militarization, we can really save a lot of money and use that to support human needs.
I actually got tricked into coming to the party way back in 2000, when I had been an advocate for single payer, saw it get defeated by basically a mountain of money pouring into our referendum. We had a ballot referendum that we were outspent about 50-1 by the insurance and pharmaceutical industries, and they only beat us back by 1 or 2 points. But, you know, I thought that was going to be our breakthrough. I thought that, you know, clean energy was going to be our breakthrough, and that we were going to shut down our coal plants and move to renewable energy way back then. But they, you know, managed to pour money into that one and push it back. You know, I thought that the wars without end in Iraq and Afghanistan, I thought maybe that would be our mobilization and our breakthrough. And we kept being beaten back, one thing after another. I thought clean elections, campaign finance reform, getting money out of politics. We actually did that in my home state of Massachusetts by a voter referendum. By a 2-to-1 margin, we got the money out. And then what happened? Our progressive Democratic legislature that could have passed any bill and overridden any veto repealed campaign finance reform. And that was about it for me. Not that I was ever a card-carrying Democrat, but I was generally voting Democratic and looking to the Democrats to fix this for us. And back in 2001, when they repealed campaign finance reform, I thought, oh my God, if they're going to block the solution to the fundamental corruption of our political system that enables working people to be thrown under the bus by big banks, that enables frontline communities to be poisoned by toxic waste sites and incinerators and coal plants, which are killing 8 million people a year around the world who are dying needless early deaths from fossil fuel energy. It's that money that keeps corrupting us, the money that prevents us from getting single-payer health care and Medicare for all, which 70% of Americans are now supporting. So I thought, oh my God, if they're going to stand in the way of that, we're going to have to step up to the plate. And it's because of people like you who refuse to be good little boys and girls, and who refuse to do what we're told, and who refuse to be blamed for the fault of a political system that resulted in the election of Donald Trump. Anybody told out there that you're responsible for the election of Donald Trump and I'm responsible? You know, this is like pathetic, and I want to just thank you and encourage you for refusing to be intimidated by that propaganda campaign, refusing to be silenced. It is so absurd. There are 100 million people who didn't vote in the presidential election. There were about 52 million that voted for Trump, and a few more who voted for Clinton, but 100 million, almost twice as many, who didn't vote at all relative to the number of Trump and Clinton supporters individually. So what does that tell you? You know, that we need more choices and more voices, not fewer. The solution to a democracy on life support is not less democracy, it's more democracy. We are the antidote to Donald Trump. And just bringing back the same policies of the Clintons, of the Obama era, the bailouts for big banks, the offshoring of our jobs through these global corporate trade agreements that give the power to corporations and take the power away from working people. A system, you know, so-called neoliberal system, which is essentially a system of putting the very wealthy few in charge and enacting policies that make the rich richer and throw everybody else under the bus, including exploiting the environment, extraction of fossil fuels and mines and uranium and the rest, which is devastating to our air quality, our water supplies, our health. This is a system that puts profit over people, profit over the planet, and profit over peace. So we say no to that system. We say yes to people, planet, and peace, and democracy that it takes in order to get us there. Being silent is not going to give us democracy. That takes us back to the era of McCarthyism, which we're in again, complete with the warmongering, the threats of preemptive strike even against Russia, which was just made in this last week by the U.S. Ambassador Kay Bailey Hutchinson, was talking about a preemptive strike on Russia if they placed some missiles in a certain spot. Well, that is a terrible thing if Russia is beefing up its missiles, but look at what we have been doing through NATO over the past several decades. We've been basically surrounding Russia's borders with missiles and troops. So it's taken two to tango here, and it takes two to untangle this mess, which is what we need to be doing. We need a foreign policy based on international law, human rights, and diplomacy. Not on economic and military domination. That military domination is a dead end. It's over 50% of our discretionary budget. It's the reason that we don't have the dollars right in our hands right now for the things that we need right here at home. So that money is there. It just needs to be used on behalf of we the people, not on behalf of the war contractors, the war profiteers, and the insurance companies and the big banks that are getting the bailouts. So we have the money. And it turns out we also have the power. Because just consider for a minute the number of young people who are locked into student debt. Anybody familiar with that? Anybody know some people who are unjustly indentured servants in this horrific predatory system of student debt? Let's just say right out now, loud and clear, public education through college is a human right. It should be provided free to all who want it. And for those who want a technical school, that should also be available for free. It used to be back in the 20th century that you needed a high school degree in order to survive. And you could get a good wage factory job with a high school degree, thank you, and do just fine. Well, things have changed. In the 21st century, to have a decent, secure job, you need a college degree. So where do we get off thinking that we just throw our younger generation into this sea of economic insecurity without preparing them for the life that they face? That's our responsibility as a generation of parents. We owe it to young people to provide them the skills that they need to survive in the world. So that means providing free public higher education. We know that it pays for itself by a 7-to-1 margin. We know that from the GI Bill following the Second World War. For every dollar we put in, we get back $7 in return. So there is no excuse not to be providing this. And at the same time, if we bailed out the bankers who crashed the economy and made them rich in the process, it's time to bail out a generation of young people trapped into student loan debt. It's time to put an end to that debt and bail out the students. We are spending right now, over the next decade, about $1.5 trillion on a new generation of nuclear weapons. So it's not so hard. You know, we need to call those nuclear weapons to a halt. No more new nukes. We need to dismantle the nukes we have. We need to sign the treaty that will ban nuclear weapons from the face of the earth. Not just a nuclear-free Korea, a nuclear-free planet Earth. Are you hearing this from Democrats? Are you hearing from Democrats that there is a nuclear threat out there, which in fact is bigger than it's ever been? Are you hearing it from Republicans? Of course not. This is why we cannot duck. We cannot abdicate our responsibility, not only on war and nuclear weapons, but also on climate, because we can fix the climate problem right now in the blink of an eye. They talk about it like, oh, it's way too complicated. It's actually not. What we do is declare an emergency, a national emergency around the climate, and we get to work. We create a New Deal, which we've already done. It got us out of the Great Depression. It can get us out of the Great Recession that we're still in for most people right now who haven't experienced that recovery for Wall Street and the stock market and maybe the top 10%. But for most people, that recovery is not there. But the Green New Deal means we create an emergency jobs program that will green our economy, create the right to a job, a good wage job, creating green energy, a green transportation system, and a green agricultural system, so that we fund healthy, local, sustainable, organic food and those who produce it. And in the process, we not only revive the economy, we turn the tide on climate change, and we make wars for oil obsolete. People who've been forced to migrate, refugees, economic refugees, war refugees, drug refugees, violence refugees, women who are fleeing domestic violence. those who've been forced to come here need to be respected and given a welcoming path to citizenship. And in fact, most Americans support citizenship for those people who have been here, who've been forced to migrate here, and who've become parts of our communities, who are part of the backbone of our economies and our culture and our general, vibrant social and cultural life. So we can fix that. We can fix our healthcare system and move to a Medicare for all single-payer system. And I want to salute the single-payer speaker who was here earlier talking about the work being done here in Ohio, because it's wonderful and exciting, and there's this new report that shows how much money you're going to save. It doesn't cost us, it actually benefits us, our health and our dollar bottom line to move to a single payer system. So we got all these win-wins out there. You know, we can have a just and sustainable, peaceful, green future, and we can have it for everyone. I think more and more of us are realizing that if we're just fighting one issue, we're never going to get to critical mass. If we want to actually succeed on any issue, we need to have a coalition across the board, a coalition for people, planet, and peace over profit. That's where we get together with enough numbers that we can prevail. So I encourage you to think about that and to think about working with the Green Party in one way or another, because it takes that coalition. Coalitions don't happen automatically. They take work, they take dialogue, and that's what a political party is. It's an organization for building that coalition and working out how you continue to dialogue together, work together, find your common agenda, and advance it all. That is what we need to do, and fighting green is the way to go, which is why I am so honored and proud to be standing here today in support of Connie Gadell-Newton and Brett Joseph. Can we please give them a round of applause right now? Let's hear it for Connie, and let's hear it for Brett. Just give a wave, if you would.
We are a statewide organization that is working towards getting single-payer, universal, publicly funded health care in the state of Ohio. Health care for all Ohioans. Yay! And then in November of 2017, we had our bill introduced into the House of Representatives. It's called the Health Security Act. The first bill was called the Ohio Health Plan, Senate Bill 91. The House bill is 440. It was introduced by Teresa Fetter. But the great thing about this is we have 18 co-sponsors for this bill, and that's phenomenal for us. We've never had that many. We have had sponsor testimony for House Bill 440, and Representative Tom Brinkman, who is a Republican, and he's the chairperson of the Insurance Committee, has promised us a expert testimony hearing in November. We've never gotten that far, so we're really excited about that.
I was diagnosed a few years ago with polycystic ovarian. I had a lot of complications, and due to some of the complications from the medication, someone smarter than me said, "You really just need some marijuana." My first initial thought was, how can I get to Colorado? I cannot afford to get to Colorado. And someone said, no, just go up I-75 and go to Michigan. They have a medical marijuana program. So I packed up, I went to Michigan, I received help. I got involved in the movement. I became a caregiver. So I was in charge of 5 patients. I was allowed to cultivate 72 plants. I got used to going to a co-op. I got used to not being in fear of getting pulled over, of getting arrested. I knew what life was like to be compliant. I came back home to Dayton, Ohio, and that was over. There was no place to get my meds. There was no place to feel safe. And one day I just was absolutely sick, and I had to ask my son for help. And 4 minutes after he left the door, I had a panic attack. My first thought was, what if he gets pulled over by the police? What if something happens? What if he gets shot? What if he gets scared from the police and starts to run? And that's what made me say, there has to be another way. I looked into Dayton. We had decriminalization laws that reduced the fine to $150. The only problem is we had an issue with, you would get a fine for $150 if you couldn't pay it all at one time. You would get taxed an additional fine to make payments on that $150. If you couldn't make the payments, they would issue out a warrant for your arrest, which leads you into a loop of poverty to prison. Once you can't pay the fine, you are absolutely going to prison. Once you get that charge for possession, you cannot use financial aid to go to college, to get a skilled trade. If something happens and you need public housing, you cannot live in public housing because now you have a possessions charge. I knew that had to change. So what I did was I went to my city leaders. My city leaders stood up for me and said, we will help you. You don't have to go through a long, arduous road. What we'll do is, instead of change the law, we will change the penalty. So we brought the penalty down to 0. I would not have been able to do that without the help of my mayor and without the help of my commissioner. We did this faster in Dayton, Ohio than any other city has done in Ohio. In America, we are the leading city. We are on the ballot. We will be voting November the 9th. This will go into effect. You can now have up to 200 grams of marijuana, and it is no ticket, no fine. It will not affect your life insurance. How many people know that if you get a possessions charge, it can affect how much your life insurance is? Now this absolutely takes this away. Absolutely, they will have no penalties, no fines, and this will help make all of our areas safer. And so this is why I joined the Sensible movement. It was originally started by Mr. Chad Thompson, who has worked diligently to help every city who has wanted help. Every city that has wanted help, he has reached out to help, and we are on the road to decriminalize marijuana in every city in the state of Ohio.
I lost 3 of my friends to heroin overdoses in the past 2 years, and those are my deep, deep friendships. I've lost far more people that were associates and acquaintances of mine to heroin overdoses, and I have seen the devastation that heroin and also the war on drugs, the super failed war on drugs, has had in Cincinnati, in my neighborhood, in our community, and across our state. So I work for the Amos Project, and we organized to collect over 730,000 signatures across the state of Ohio to put issue 1 on the ballot in November. Thank you. Thanks. And what issue 1 does is it builds off of what you were saying, or for Sensible Norwood as well. What issue 1 does is it makes all non-violent drug possession felonies, F4 and F5s, retroactively, they become misdemeanors. So this is one of our ways to address the racialized policing system of the United States. For when our brown and black brothers and sisters were getting felony possession charges for the crack epidemic, and now they are still suffering from that, right? We're still suffering. Our communities are still broken because of that. This is a way to address that. But issue 1 also moves that money, which is $136 million every year, into drug treatment, drug prevention, and trauma care. For those of you who have friends or family members who've suffered from addiction, you know that most of the time it's because of a broken heart. That's what I like to say. It's a heart problem and a hurt problem. And so we try to numb it out by turning to heroin or turning to whatever sort of substance that you use habitually. And for us, a way to address that is to make sure that people who are habitual users are able to access treatment. I tried to get my friend into treatment 2 months ago, and there was no treatment facility available in Cincinnati because all of the beds were full. And he is still currently using and now homeless on the streets. It's time for us as a people to stand up and say that this system does not work. We can't police our way out of drug abuse and drug addiction. We can't incarcerate our way out of brokenness. We can't continue to ignore people who suffer from these serious addictions and say that they're just failed people. Because to me, no person is a trash person. Every person deserves to have redemption. Every person deserves to have a full life. And that's why Issue 1 matters to me. The other reason why Issue 1 matters to me is because right now, 25% of the people who are in jail or prison currently are there for a probation or parole violation. So if you were out of jail, you had already served your time, right? Because if we're going under this punishment idea, then that person has already served their time. They've already been punished for the crime. 25% of them are going back to jail for missing a probation appointment, for getting fired from your job, for not being able to pay your fees and fines, which are ridiculous as is already. That's just too many people. Hamilton County is overcrowded right now with people who are nonviolent offenders or people who are waiting for bail. So what we do is we believe that Issue 1 will remedy those things so that people who actually need to have, need to currently be incarcerated for violent offenses have space in jail to be incarcerated for violent offenses, but also they have rehabilitation in jail, because I believe that no person is beyond saving. So Issue 1 opens up more rehabilitation for prisons. It opens up more programs for prisons, because right now prisons are without the funding to actually have programs to rehabilitate people. So these folks get out, and a lot of times they're worse off than they were when they got in there. We've got some people who are against Issue 1, and they are using fear to scare people, everyday people like ourselves, to say that Issue 1 will crowd our streets with criminals. Well, 90% of the people who are in jail are going to get out anyways. So wouldn't you rather them go through rehabilitation and then come out? They're saying that truckloads of fentanyl will be on our city and in our streets. That's not true. Issue 1 doesn't touch drug trafficking charges. It doesn't touch intent to distribute charges. And people with less amounts of fentanyl than what Issue 1 proposes should be a misdemeanor are already getting trafficking charges and put in jail anyways. This doesn't touch that. It only touches everyday personal use. We believe that those are not crimes that should be punishable by long prison sentences.
To all of you who are listening right now and paying attention on the video stream or live streams, please reach out and contact us right now. The Constance for Ohio campaign and the Ohio Green Party needs assistance with reaching out to the public to get our message spread, knocking on doors, going up to public events, showing up down at the corner holding a yard sign and doing a honk and wave event. Anything we can do to get the word out, to try to make a difference, and to elect Connie as our next governor of Ohio.
You know, our democracy is under attack, and this opportunity is for us to affirm the unstoppable power of collective action. Since we started, Connie and I, in this campaign almost a year and a half ago, most of the time has been spent in coalition building, and I think you're starting to see the fruits of those efforts as we, you know, we have all these issue campaigns coming together, and as you hear from Connie, I mean, that's what the Green Party is all about, is providing access to the electoral process for people that really believe that the power is with the people. Not should be, it is. We need to claim it. One of the things that Constance Gadell-Newton administration will do when we get in office is we're going to change the metrics, change the measures that we use to determine fiscal responsibility so that it incorporates things like the genuine progress indicator, measures of social mobility, measures of public health, measures of educational attainment, measures of community health, you know, how vibrant, how much economic activity is happening that is local and that is keeping the money circulating within the local communities. All these things, we need to catch up with the rest of the world, because these measures are being used in many places around the world that inform and provide a feedback for public planning that allows us to, you know, to really target and break some of these vicious cycles. Single-payer health care pays for itself. It will save the state, you know, at a bare minimum about $11 billion, and it goes up from there. You know, some estimates are twice that amount. It will not alter or change the safeguards we have in the federal system with the Medicaid and so forth. It deals with the lack of access to insurance for a growing number of people. But we're going to do one thing that goes beyond, as is recommended by Single Payer Action Network, that goes beyond both the current systems as well as efforts to date, and that is to really, really take definitive action to contain the cost, the mushrooming costs of healthcare. And we can only do that through a single payer system. We have created this category of the working poor that didn't exist before, right? Not you had the middle class, the poverty, and so forth. Poverty is something that is human created, and through good policies we can end it. And this is not pie in the sky stuff. We're talking about a guaranteed basic income. Economic development needs to be localized, it needs to be supported, and we propose the creation of a public bank that at the statewide level that will also support a series of community banks at the local level. This is a sound investment of our public dollars to take some small portion of the savings that we gain by ending this privatization madness, ending the private prisons, ending the shelling out our public funds to the private management companies that are managing 70% of the state's charter schools without any economic accountability whatsoever. ECOT is just the extreme example of that. This election is consequential, and we're getting a lot of messages. You've probably seen them. I saw a tweet come through, on the way down here. I don't know why I'm still on all these Twitter feeds, saying a vote for the Green Party is a vote for Trump. These are scare tactics. Split the vote. We're the spoilers and all that. They don't. It's just not true. It's a lie. When we have 60 to 70% of voters that are not turning out to the polls, particularly in the midterm election, maybe the thing to do is ask ourselves or ask our friends and neighbors, why are we not voting? And the answer is going to be pretty interesting coming back. I don't like the choices. I don't want to vote for a lesser of two evils. I've done it before. I've seen this story before. I've seen this pattern happening before. Promises are made, and then as soon as I vote for the lesser of two evils, as soon as they get into power, guess what? I can't distinguish the one I voted for the one that I thought I was voting against. Donald Trump is not the real problem. It's the system that's the problem. It's the system that we need to disrupt. And that includes the electoral system and the way that we, think about the exercise of our authority. As I said at the outset, we have the power. The power is with the people, but we have to mobilize. There are times when we have to stand up and we have to exercise. And it's not just when you vote, and it's not just the opportunity to write a letter to a senator. It's not just getting on an issue campaign or signing a petition. It has to be through how we participate in our communities and our neighborhoods, and how we find our voice and use that voice in an ongoing way in a democratic process. That's what a democracy looks like, and that's what the Green Party stands for, and that's what we are at this point have the opportunity to affirm in a very strong way with a very strong turnout, a green turnout on November 6th. Thank you.